change the order.
All right, we are going to start. There's one other person sitting down. So here we are, 1 year later. Just wanted to thank everybody for coming and welcome to, I guess this is now our 4th annual OX Network Conference. I'd also like to thank our host, Stevens, for hosting us here this year. And what I plan to do here first is to go through introductions, but given that we have some time constraints now, I'm going to make that, ask everybody to be pretty quick with their introductions. And what I did here is just to show,
you can use a clicker.
So we have a number of guests coming. What we are doing this year is we invited business guests to help us to look at this whole area of how we can take our research and leverage it more closely with the business community. So I think that the only person we have here right now is Ismail. So you're representing a big part of your group, and we'll catch up with the rest when they come in, and I think that's the case, right? And Scott, right, is also here, and you're with Cognify, or you're
Faith Group.
Faith Group. Oh, you're with Faith Group. Okay. Do you want to say a little bit about what Faith Group does?
You know what? I'd rather wait for Frank to get in.
Okay,
All right.
that's okay.
You'll find out if he is.
And also, Stevens has a major relationship with Accenture, and there's a gentleman, Mike, who's going to be in and out today. And what he does is to also look at the research that's being done here, and we've invited him to this conference to also see if there's anything of interest that we're doing that might be of interest back with his customer base. And Josephine is here from Germany. Do you want to say just a little bit about?
Yeah, I'm Josephine Liu. I'm from Austria, Graz actually, second largest city in Austria. And I'm here for the Urban Future Global Conference. That's the world's largest event for city changers to promote the sharing of knowledge, ideas, resources to make our cities and planet more sustainable.
Okay, thank you. And then our host, I'm sorry, I'm distracted because Moti's been wandering. Is he on the phone? Let me go get him. So Moti is the president of Cognify. So we have a number of people here from Stevens, and welcoming our guests here. And Bill. And Bill's going to be talking in a minute, so I'll let you introduce yourself when we get started, if that's okay. Jose, who's now our liaison and heading up the X Center USA, which is hosted here by Stevens. Greg, you'll be talking to this afternoon. John Custy, and he'll be talking later this morning. And Roger Jones, and he'll be talking also later this morning. And now the Moti. Come on in.
Just waiting for the person.
I'm waiting for a colleague of mine. I'll join you in a second.
Okay, no problem then.
Thank you.
Okay, going with the flow. So also now start with the X Center members. So Elena Ilmala is from YASA and also works very extensively with the center in both Helsinki and in Vienna. And Markku is also from Finland, and they both will be talking later today. So I'll ask them to introduce themselves. I'm also talking later, so I'll introduce myself later. Adrian Singh, that's been working with us for a number of years, also with his firm, for Singh out of Germany. And we have an exciting opportunity. He's going to run a game with us all this afternoon, too. And he has a number of his colleagues here with him. Ava, who's over there. Petri is here. And Sergio has been now involved with us for a couple of years, and he's been long-term with UN, and now is, can you take that? with setting up a center in Brazil. So Sergio, welcome. And that's somebody that's probably lost. And Thomas has also been working with us for a couple of years, and he's out of the ACT Center Vienna. And do you want to say just a little bit about what you've been doing now? Or?
Yeah, I'm affiliated with University of Graz. We are working on transition of energy systems towards more renewable energy, and my specific field is in decision making and collective movement.
Excuse me, let me just add something to Thomas's remark. Thomas will also be giving a seminar here on his work on Thursday afternoon for any of you who are still around to come to that. It'll be 2 o'clock Thursday afternoon in this room.
Okay, and Victor, who's over in the corner there, who's also is from San Jose, Silicon Valley. He's been associated right from the founding. And you should have in your packets, and everyone have the agenda. And basically, it's pretty straightforward. We do have dinner this evening. There's going to be a couple of coffee breaks. They've set coffee up in the back. And Bill, where is the restrooms?
So the restrooms, men's is here right off this door, and you follow
the
around
women's
the
is-
corridor, the one
Yeah,
like this.
the green wall.
On the right hand side.
So this morning, we're going to be doing updates. First, in the morning section is set up to be doing some updates of what we're doing in the different centers. This afternoon is we're looking at urban resilience from a number of capacities and a number of presenters. And then Adrian and his group is going to run an active game. Do you want to say just a little bit about it, or do you want to be surprised?
You all have to be in the spirit of playing a game. There's no lecturing, it's all about you.
And then we have
Really?
Yes. Mr. Mayor.
dinner this evening. And if it's still raining, we are going to arrange for a van to be picking us up downstairs and get off to dinner.
Where is the dinner?
It's at an Amanda's up on Washington. So, and Alex Washburn is here at Stevens, and he's come here from long time being an urban planner in New York, and now he'll be talking later this afternoon, but has set up a center here called Rouse. He'll be talking a little bit later.
Tomorrow, and supposedly it won't be raining this afternoon even. And we are right down here in this building. And as you can see, we have a better view of New York City than they do.
You can use a clicker.
With this.
Yep.
So Stevens, the illustrious Stevens family owned all of Hoboken, and it was a resort for people to escape the heat from New York. And there was all sorts of things around here. As you see, he was treasurer in the Revolutionary War, first steam locomotive, the T-rail, the cowcatcher, I mean, just all sorts of things. His third son, Edwin, founded the Institute in 1870. The America's Cup is actually not named after the country, it's named after the boat, the ship, America. And it competed against the British. And the New York Yacht Club became the host whenever the Americans are the defending champion. The American Society of Mechanical Engineers was founded here. And until, I think it was 1950 or something, I don't remember the exact date, mechanical engineering was the only degree that the Institute offered. Some of the things of innovation, Taylor's scientific management, Harvey Gantt invented the Gantt chart, and a whole variety of things that have gone on over the years. I didn't know till recently that we were involved with bubble wrap. This is how you keep financial disasters from happening. You wrap the bubbles. We have a focus in our strategic plan, very much student-centric. We're primarily undergraduates on campus, and we have various areas of focus. It's interesting, it's a smaller university, unlike the other places I've been at, like Illinois or Georgia Tech, we've actually decided to not do some things because of this resources. And
How many students?
I'm going to get to that. 2,900 undergraduates, 3,300 graduate students. Most of the graduate students are not here. We do a lot of executive programs at companies. The students' averages continue to rise. A variety of degree programs. This is included because we won the solar decathlon this year. So we came in number one. Really, I've been on the faculty of 5 universities, and one of the things I think that distinguishes Stevens is it's really outward looking. It really wants to do things in the world, not just in the lab or in the office. And that's an important characteristic of it. Even though we're small, we provide the 8th most engineering master's degrees in the country, which would probably surprise people who maybe not have had heard of Stevens even before this day. We rank 3rd, I think, out of 900 colleges in terms of 20-year net ROI from your tuition investment in Stevens. And part of that is because 92% of our graduates are engineers and scientists. So they get good paying jobs. A third of our graduates go to Wall Street. It used to be that they went to Bell Labs and they went to the big pharma companies. Now the majority is Wall Street. The second most is consulting. We head the System Engineering Research Center, which is a Department of Defense research center, UARC, University Applied Research Center, and we have all the other universities as members. So there's about 300 and some faculty researching in the systems area that are funded by this UARC. This is all the different centers. This is the center you're in, and I'm going to give you a couple slides on that in a minute. We do a lot of stuff related to water. And in fact, the towing tank over in Hudson is the largest university-based towing tank in the U.S. And all of the America's Cup contestants, their boats are tried out in that towing tank. And one of our faculty is the chief hydrodynamicist for Oracle's boat. Now SSE is in the Babbio Center here. Later you'll get to see at night how this atrium really shows off New York City. We have 3 divisions, systems and software, engineering science, enterprise science and engineering, which Jose leads, and financial engineering. And this center is roughly affiliated with this, although the center is across the whole campus. One of the things we have is we call an open academic model. And so we basically look for talent wherever it is. We don't expect all our faculty to have come along traditional career paths. And so we have some really remarkable senior executives who left major jobs to come and will be on our faculty. And then alliances is the name of the game when you're small. Okay, so these are all our alliances. The latest being with Accenture. Accenture's alliance actually started in 2014. So in terms of collaborative models, this is the way we go. So for example, we don't have much bench strength in social sciences, and so we team with Georgetown on projects, for example. And that's it. Before I switch to CCSE, any questions about Stevens? If they're hard ones, Jose will answer them. Okay.
Switch.
Yeah, switch to. Now, one thing that's going to be happening while I'm talking here is Dr. Annie Yu here is going to be working behind me getting set up, because we felt we should give you a demo of how this is all used. Okay, and so she is going to be bringing up her demo, which is a interactive simulation of the healthcare ecosystem of New York City, all 66 hospitals. And I won't steal any of her thunder about that. The lab was formed in late 2012, and we're going to talk about our point of view and some of the research issues. This will be relatively quick and give Annie some time to get this all working. I do want to introduce Cara Pepe, who's back here. She's the Director of Industry and Government Relations for the Center. She's also a PhD student. And so if you had any questions about CCSE or any follow-ups, she's available as well. I have to leave from 11 to 4 to go select the new provost. So I can't really skip that meeting. So our point of view. When we first got started on this, we thought we should come up with a mission and vision and all this other stuff. And the people who are on our advisory board, who are all from industry, said, we don't actually care about your mission and vision. What we care about is what's your point of view on complex systems and enterprises. And so that's where this came from. We're focused mostly on large-scale public-private systems, where network complexity and feedback loop make prediction and control very much more complex than the past. We require knowledge and expertise that cut across engineering, physical sciences, social sciences, etc., in order to address these problems. And great insight can be gained, we assert, by supporting decision makers to interactively explore real or computationally imagined complex systems. And that's what this is about being able to computationally imagine a different New York City in terms of who are the hospital players, etc. The research issues we focus on are really two overarching ones. How do you computationally model complex systems and enterprises? And I'll give you examples in a minute. This is model-driven research. But we also try to understand forces driving change and processes enabling change. And this is more data-driven research. So we do research that is also case-based. It's not modeling at all. We try to have the two dovetail, and we try to balance those two approaches. So the domains of research are, I'm going to go through each of these: healthcare, finance, urban systems, the vehicle industry, particularly autonomous vehicles, and national security. In healthcare, we look at prevention and wellness, chronic disease management, how do we deliver population health, how do we optimize patient flow. And we've actually applied some of the similar models to signaling pathways in cancer biology. Annie's going to be talking about a piece of the strategic responses to the Affordable Care Act. I was asked to give an opening talk on enterprise transformation a year and a half ago, I said, I guess almost 2 years ago, to all these CEOs from major providers in the United States. And so I gave this fairly general talk, and then they each presented their strategic plan of how they're dealing with the Affordable Care Act. And one of the things, not surprising in retrospect, is their strategy was highly dependent on what they thought their competitors were doing in their area. And that's what motivated what Annie's going to show you, because we felt we really needed to understand how hospitals compete with each other and what strategic choices they have. And we interviewed in the end about 20 CEOs, and we got their top choices of, there's 5 things you can do and you can mix and match them, but that's about all you got, only choices you got.
Bill, sorry, before you go forward, could you say just a little bit more about, you had the point about national security?
I'm going to get there.
Oh, wait, okay, sorry. Yep.
Financial systems, this is primarily with Accenture funding. We were looking at how small financial technology startups are disrupting banks. They're going in and taking one service line, which the bank makes maybe 6% on, and they're offering better service, and they're asking for like 0.5%. Okay. The bank was charging that not because it was its cost, because they're covering other ills with those cash flows. And so this is happening quite a bit, and we have a project looking at investment banking. This is an insurance-funded one from QEB in Australia. This is looking at how do we support insurance underwriters. We have another project which is really exciting. Accenture has a digital index for how sophisticated a company is in their digital infrastructure across all the functions. And we've been able to take this index, which is very labor intensive, and we've automated it. So using text analytics, we can produce the index automatically. We have a big meeting on Thursday here for the first round of presenting the results of that. That's a team with Northern Light, who is a text analytics company. Urban systems, you're going to hear a lot more of this from Alex later on. Smart City Hoboken, Virtual Antarctica was the first project that was done in this space, and this is what CRUX stands for. So I'll just pass on that right now. We have two other things going on in there. One is two students doing dissertations. They'll finish this month or next month on cities. One is on energy efficiency of cities, and the other one is on basically a new kind of urban fabric, a new way of designing cities in developing countries. The vehicle industry, I've long been fascinated by this, so we've done all sorts of studies. Right now, we're focused on autonomous vehicles. And autonomous vehicles, from our study of this, probably could be an X event. It may be an X event if it rolls out, but the sponsors of this is Accenture, but they're with their auto industry practice, their insurance practice, and their banking practice. Because the insurance practice, we had a meeting we've met with several executive teams of insurance companies, and they're all afraid of what happens when there's no longer any risk because cars can't hit each other. Okay, what's your business model then? Well, what happens when people don't buy cars? They just buy the service of cars. So Uber or Google, whoever is buying most of the cars, well, then there's not going to be any individual car loans. So the banks are worried about that. And of course, the auto industry is worried about who provides the car and who gets what profit margin. It's a very exciting project. There's some projections that this will result in losing 5 million jobs in the United States. Now that there'll be new jobs that emerge, but nevertheless, the traditional jobs will disappear. Interestingly, this is kind of an interesting X event because the actual replacement of all personal cars with a car service from autonomous cars, if it happened overnight, that would be, of course, amazing, but it won't happen overnight. But what's happening is, one of our scenarios we're looking at is safety devices, radar, other kinds of things on the car are increasingly showing up on cars. And so what's happening is we're incrementally getting to the point where the car can just drive itself. Then methods and tools, and this is some of the work that is mostly supported by our DoD sponsors. Most of the sponsors in industry sponsors are not willing to support the development of a general tool or a general method. And so the DoD sponsors are very important. We have a modeling methodology, the Immersion lab here, so named because you can be immersed in the complexity of your system. We do a lot of computational modeling. Policy flight simulators are developing models and simulations for policymakers. And the reason it was named policy flight simulators, I called it a multi-level simulation, and the decision makers didn't know what I was talking about. They said, I didn't have a better way to describe it. And so just off the top of my head, I said, well, it's sort of like a policy flight simulator. And they said, oh, now we know what you're doing. And so it stuck. It's sort of, sometimes you like to listen to your customers. We do a lot on the economic side of things and a lot on statistical side of things. This is the lab. That's Annie in the past. That's Annie now. This is the CEO of Accenture Digital. We've had many, many groups through here, healthcare groups, healthcare consultants, et cetera, to see this demo. Now this is our strategic plan. This is it, the whole thing. Okay. Where I got this, when I was running the Tenenbaum Institute at Georgia Tech, I developed a strategic plan, and one of my board members said, I don't like any strategic plans that are more than one page. And so I'm going to give you a template. So I obviously changed it, but we're trying to understand and manage complex public-private enterprises. We have the usual performance indices that you'd have at a university. That's not surprising. We have various factors that we can leverage. One that is hard for other universities to compete with is the location here in New York City. One of the reasons we have so many executive teams come through and see our demos is because they happen to be in New York anyways. And they know what we're doing. They say, hey, can we stop by, spend a day with you? That didn't happen when I was in Atlanta. It didn't happen when I was in Champaign-Urbana, Illinois, for sure. So that's very important. The CERT network is also very important. And so we partner with disciplinary thought leaders because we can't have them all here. We partner with domain enterprises and thought leaders. So one of the things, last week, I think it was 2 weeks ago, Leon McGinnis was here as a longtime colleague from Georgia Tech. and spent a time he gave a talk, but he also spent time with our faculty and graduate students. I don't know if I mentioned this to before. He said, your students are very unusual compared to Georgia Tech students. He says, your PhD students really know their domains. And then they tell you about their methodology, but they're interested in the domain. He says, the students at Georgia Tech are really interested in the methodology and only learn as much domain knowledge as they need to be able to turn it into equations. So that's part of the Stevens culture out in the world. And then here we've got some of the pieces that I've already talked about. I really like the idea of a one-page strategic plan. Once it gets bigger, what are you going to do with it? And then we have various initiatives I've talked about, but we have the same kind of competencies. We have the same kind of competencies you'd expect in this kind of school. So they crisscross. And then relationships are crucial. So we have all sorts of sponsors from government, from industry. We have a very nice grant from Robert Wood Johnson Foundation right now. And we have all sorts of people we partner with, and we are constantly on the search for good PhD students. So that's my story. Any questions before we get rid of the slides? Yes, sorry.
Studying blockchain?
Yes. We have a couple of students that are interested in that. There's a lot of interest in that. I'm in the course I'm teaching here on Tuesdays, but I won't today. There's one student doing a project on that who actually was a hedge fund manager. Now it's interesting that he really knows his world. Other questions? Okay, let's get rid of the screens. Now my idea was, now that we've done this, that we just don't use any more slides today. We just do demos. You're going to do that, right? We had Liberty Mutual was here a few weeks ago with his executive team, and they came in and they said they wanted no slides. We just want demos, real things. And then we see more and more of that. Okay. Annie is a research assistant professor here, and it's all yours.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Annie Yu. My background is about industrial system engineering with a focus. All my research work you see on the sort of different screen is about healthcare delivery and service systems. So I guess there are a lot of them. So basically I will introduce three parts. The first part is about healthcare, modeling the merge and acquisitions in New York City area. And then we will see what's New York City now with more than 60 different hospitals, what it will go to be 10 years after that. And then some of the modeling, we see the providers network structure. So basically we have physicians, hospitals, and we will begin with the first one. So the idea is that usually people, when you talk with the executive, senior executive, manager level people, when you give them the results, a static report, they will not believe that. So basically we want to do a lot of study which help them to merge with hospitals who have better efficiency in terms of operating efficiency, and so I can learn from them. So there are different motivations. So for example, this basically chart is also a data visualization part to help us to understand the disease, each of the disease groups versus different hospitals. So for example, when I click each one of them, and it will sort according to different disease group. It will sort according to different hospital. So basically this is the reimbursement rate. So you can see this particular hospital, Southside Hospitals. So the first particular disease, it accounts for, this particular hospitals receive 48% of the Medicare, Medicaid service. And then we can also sort according to different disease groups. And then from that, you can see that if we are looking at the reimbursement groups, it will be more aligned with different hospitals. If we switch maybe to the payment, you can see it is more aligned with different disease groups. So that's why kind of like the manager level people, they can get rid of the Excel table but play with different data set. And when you click each of these points, you can see how much, for example, this total payments was the average total payments. So you can have a better knowledge. And then they will not only look at the result of the simulation, merger and acquisition simulation, so they have a better understanding into the model. And then in the main screen, you will see this is the merge acquisition game. So where you have the motivations and you want to bid each of the hospitals you want to merge with. And then we run a simulation, and then this is, for example, we have a list of different variables we want to change. And then here, this is the first version of the model, which is 2 years ago. So now we have maybe more than 30, 40 different variables. But just give you an idea, for example, when you slide each of different variables, and then the model will run in the back side, and you can see the result in the front side. So maybe, so that people can say, okay, and I remember there are 2 particular hospitals see my demo in the lab, and then one of them, they are Mayo, they are Mount Sinai. So basically our model show Mount Sinai have a very high probability to merge with Mass as well. And then this was, our data was collected before 2012, and in fact they were merged in 2013. So basically shows there's a high percentage of our predicted power of the simulation. And then this is another view. So a lot of people, they are wondering when we do different modeling simulation, for example, also in the extreme events series, how you're going to validate your model, right? So basically there's no way for us to validate our model. So what we can do is we provide a lot of the validation tool for them to use to understand the model better. For example, this is the merge acquisition database. When you click each of the dots, you will see, actually this should be reflected in the screen. Just a second. So when I click each of the different dots, there will be merger and acquisition transactions. So you can see, okay, what happened in each of the merger acquisition transactions. And then when I click each of the company, so when we talk about hospital merger and acquisitions, not only hospitals, they want to merge with each other, but a lot of different, for example, this is CVS and Walgreens, there's pharmaceutical or consumer market people, they will try to do the hospital merger and acquisitions. And then what are the different activities they have done in the past maybe 10 years. And then what are the top companies that they are involved in merger and acquisitions. And then beyond that, from the database, from the transaction, from the company, we also look at their different, for example, their different revenues, different financial reports. We can see here, this is CVS and this Walgreens. We can see CVS is catching up those Walgreens, right? But if we change to different variables, we basically, for example, return on asset, and we click update, we can see, okay, CVS do below Walgreens. So that basically moves from the database to the company and to their financials. But we also take one more step. So basically here, let me click a lot of different things. So that means you can be the expert of one particular company, but you can be an expert of all the different companies in the industry. So this is kind of like a data mining tool, tell you mine over 500 different news reports to say, okay, which companies are more likely to do which kind of events. And then we can say, okay, for example, Walgreens has more product-related announcements, so they will release more new products. However, compared with CVS, it has much more ratio. So we can say maybe this is one of the reasons why Walgreens has a better return on asset, but CVS is catching up in terms of the revenue. So basically, this is for the more of the decision makers to explore more different things when they really do the decision making for the merger and acquisitions. And then this particular graph is looking at structure. So we want to see what's the network structure of different healthcare providers. And then they are quite different. You can see the pinkish color is more about different specialists, and then the red dot that pops up is the hospitals. So you can see in the Boston area, it's more hospital dominated, right? All the different specialists, they are clustered around different hospitals. And then there's 3, 5, 4 big hospitals. In the Seattle area, it's more clinic dominated. So all the primary care physicians, they are just surrounding around different clinics. And in Houston, it's a different dynamics. It's more like specialist cluster. So for example, this is a particular cluster of different specialists, and then there's another small cluster. So it's different dynamics. And then this basically says, this is also related with the referral pattern. So basically it says, okay, if I'm a patient, I can switch between different physicians. So for example, if we click, I don't know if you can see this chart, if we click one of the nodes, basically says, okay, a lot of primary care physicians, they are linked together. But this is not true. People cannot refer primary care physicians to different patients. So this is basically says the patients switch quite often to different primary care physicians. And from these, we can see, okay, these different structures really have an impact on the quality and cost of different healthcare. And then in this study, we basically look at diabetes patients. So we can say, okay, maybe if this primary care dominated, maybe they will have better healthcare outcomes because basically primary care physicians group together all the different specialists, and they can provide better healthcare service. And then this chart basically look at hospital's catchment area. So for example, if we click this one, we can see, so basically the Mount Sinai is more providing service in the local area, but hospital for special surgery provide a more broad service. And then in this chart basically says people live in this region, which hospital they always go to, right? So basically people if live in this region, there's no dominated hospital, so these 4 different hospitals they can always go to. And then this chart says if one hospital closure, how it might affect different regions. For example, this hospital closed in 2010. So these particular hospital, Bellevue hospitals, Mount Sinai Baptist Grove, they show the responsibility to taking care of these particular patients. So these are pretty much the set of, like, we use a lot of different set of tools, for example, simulation, modeling, and then data visualization, data analytics. We all use a lot of different softwares. We look at, for example, all the data we've shown on the screen. We have data from the hospital cost reports in terms of 5,000 hospitals in the U.S. What's their profit, what's their revenue, what's their emergency room cost, what's their bed utilization, and everything. We have also their quality reports, for example, in terms of their operational quality as well as patient satisfaction quality. And then we try to combine all the different data sets together, and then to do the system, it's more like decision-making process to help the decision makers to better understand their problems and solve their problems. Thank you.
You just mentioned a couple other things before we give you back the floor here. We have a lot of other models. For example, we have a model we developed this past year of research universities. So we can, across the 7 screens, you can do things like decide how you want to make tenure decisions, decide what percentage of faculty you want in each area, what kind of focus you want to have in terms of what funding agencies, what publication outlets. You can decide on tuition and what endowment goals you have, and you see how it all plays out and how it affects your financials and your brand value. And it was interesting because when we first got it going, we had some deans and vice provosts in here, and they were discovering things they didn't know because they just had never looked at the data. Okay, and so they didn't realize it. So everybody in that time was right in this screen here. It'll come back. It's changing cities, I think, isn't it? So the idea was, by the immersion, is that most of the time when we're in a real decision situation, the people aren't here, they're here. And there's a group of maybe 4, 5, 6, and they're trying things and pointing things out to each other. And we have the university model. We have some stuff that Alex might mention that we've done on modeling Hoboken and flooding. And so we've done a variety. We've got another model in here we run of the automobile industry. And we're predicting how technologies get adopted in the automobile industry. And the next phase of that model is to expand it so that we have autonomous vehicles as part of the mix of the fleet. But the reason we did this, and it started off with some work in healthcare and the Institute of Medicine, was we found that we're presenting our work to people who are very, very bright, otherwise they wouldn't be in the Institute of Medicine, and they don't understand what we're doing. And as soon as we started to go to visualizations, and then large visualizations, and then give them the controls, they start buying into it, because they can try things. They can move the sliders, they can click the radio buttons, they can try their own scenarios. It made an enormous difference, and so we decided that in the domains we're working in, we can't count on everybody being an engineer or scientist and inherently know what we're doing. And the interactive visualizations make a big difference. And this is what we call the policy flight simulator, because we're talking about management policies, government policies, strategies, et cetera. And the basic tagline for the Policy Flight Simulator is that you should fly the future before you write the check. And that seems to be popular with our sponsors. And that's our show. If you have any questions, we'll be glad to answer. Yeah.
It's very impressive that, I mean, I guess for healthcare you have relatively comparable data that's publicly available. If you move into other sectors, the problem of garbage in, garbage out, you know, can you really take and trust company statements of their finance and all the rest of it? How far, how quickly, I mean, how much time do you have to be spending on quality of data and stuff
well,
like that?
what Annie needed was because she could do mergers and acquisitions, she needed the income statements, balance sheets, operational performance center of all these hospitals. There's 66 hospital corporations, it's more buildings. They would never give that to us. But from our public filings that they're required to make, Annie reverse engineered and got back to their financial statements.
That's a lot of Annie's time there.
That was about 6 months, as I recall, to do that. The other thing we've done with a lot of the text analytics, we have all the companies' press releases, but we also have everything written about them by the Wall Street Journal, by Bloomberg, by others. So we have two sides of it. And so that way we can balance some of the bias. The data set with GM, they buy a data set that they can give us free because we're research partners. And it has, the data in it is every single car produced in the world each year and what was on that car. Each car, many terabytes of data. And we could use that to look at the adoption of technologies. So data is an issue, and you want to get good sources if you can. Another one we used was a Capital IQ data sources. So there's some data sources, partnerships. We haven't had to buy any data yet because we have partnerships with people who already paid for it. There's another question here. Yeah.
Right, you partially answered already. How long did it take to reach that stage where Amy presented? Since the beginning up to the end, just in this precise case.
Maybe a year.
You mean in terms of visualization or in terms
not
of the back?
visualization, the modeling, the collection of the data, then modeling, and then the visualization to reach that stage where altogether, how long does it take? Months?
I think it depends. For example, when I first doing healthcare research, it takes me 6 months to find all these data sets and integrate them together. Yeah. And then the second one, when you see here is kind of like the map, geographic map. That's the work I collaborate with Jose. And then together it talks, because I've already so familiar with the data set and I know where I can find the information. And then basically when we start project and then from the scratch and then build a model, finish the report and then finish the paper, it takes only 2 weeks. So it really depends. So if you don't know the data set, it takes like forever and it can never end. But if you really have good hand on all the different more than 20 sets of data sets, you know where you can find it, what are the key variables you really need so you can really finish the work quick. It's more about ideas and then the tools, the visualization tools you're going to use.
The other interesting thing about Andy's demo is it is actually never the same, because almost every time I come in, she's added some new thing. Okay, so it continues to evolve.
Yes, thank you very much for this wonderful 2 presentations. I have a question on this policy flight simulator. Who used it already and which topics?
So for example, for Emory Health, we did a study of their prevention and wellness program. And a lot of the questions we get asked is, we proved this out with 700 patients to be very successful, now we want to do it with 100,000. What's the problem? And usually what happens is some inefficiencies that don't bother you with 700 that really bite you at 100,000. And so with Emory, we use the models to computationally redesign their organization. So we could consider like hundreds of different reorganizations in the afternoon, and homed in and got them to change the way they stratified the patients and what they did for the patients. So these were the clinicians who ran the entity. The people we did Alzheimer's with, Indiana Health, and they are using the model on an ongoing basis as their data comes in to look at what the scaling problems will be. One of their problems is in the Alzheimer's care, they go to people's homes, okay, and so it becomes a big logistics problem. It's sort of like the UPS problem, right, of how to efficiently get there. And they have some work rules that really inherently make them inefficient, the Indiana state work rules. And we're able to show them the cost of those work rules because they said, people will never change this rule. Well, we'll show you how much this is costing you by having to comply with these rules. So those are a couple examples. Right now we're doing with UPenn, transition care management is how they take care of elderly people after they leave the hospital so they don't come back. Okay? And they've had a successful randomized clinical trials, many successful randomized clinical trials. However, it's been slow in terms of other people adopting this program. So we're studying about how do providers make the decision to adopt a proven program. And one of the things that's come up from this, and we have an advisory board with providers and Medicare and Medicaid and stuff like that on it. One of the things we've discovered is the providers have the basic question of, okay, you ran these experiments, you got these results, you showed a positive impact, but how much was your population like my population? And that creates a huge uncertainty. And so what we're doing with our models is trying to take the big data set we have that actually came from the trials and sample it to get the same demographics as the provider who has that question. Okay? And so that's a project that's in process right now. But we're learning a lot. I remember when I was a young assistant professor, I was a little chagrined that every time I published a journal article, the world didn't read it right away. And then went on to do studies of, well, okay, if I wanted engineers to read these articles and design things differently, what would have to happen? And we did 10 years of studies of this. And then we began to understand why they didn't consume the journal articles right away. Same thing in healthcare. We have this notion of evidence-based medicine. And when I first got involved with this about 10 years ago with the Institute of Medicine, I was on a committee and I said, I'm really pretty naive about this, so let me ask a real basic question. What's the alternative to evidence-based medicine? And they said, well, less than half of the medical decisions made in the country are evidence-based. The rest of them are precedence-based. It's what you learned in medical school 30 years ago. And the fact that there's a better procedure now, a better intervention, you're just not aware of it. And the notion that once you have evidence-based, evidence that proves something works, why doesn't the hospital adopt it immediately, right? Well, they have a huge number of things on their agenda and a huge number of things going on. And so we're trying to understand how ideas make it through all that chaos to actually get done. And it's a really fascinating problem. But of course we see in a lot of our research, like the technology adoption in cars, just because somebody patents something and made it work, everything, doesn't mean the cars all have it next year. There's a much longer process of maturation and confidence building. So that's a long answer to your question. Any others? Yes, sir.
What role do you see for artificial intelligence in developing your models?
Well, I'd say over time, as we do things repetitively, like in the healthcare world, we've had about 5 or 6 good times with data already, starting to see some patterns. That's still natural intelligence, seeing the patterns. I could see how some things could come to play in there. The stuff we're doing, we're just getting started for the insurance underwriters. A tremendous number of the things that they see are just routine. They've seen them again and again and again. You could imagine artificial intelligence could help them a bit with all those, and they could just focus on these really unusual cases. Although we've done a lot of work on problem solving in the past, a lot of work with Jens Rasmussen from Denmark. Sometimes human decision makers are not that good in unusual circumstances. They get captured by cues that are not really relevant, but that's what they're familiar with. So we did an interesting story. I need to give you your agenda time back.
No, you're okay.
Okay. We developed had a graduate student at Georgia Tech, Annette Knoiper, and she had an idea. We developed a rule-based model of how people ran a process control simulation. And we developed a model for each person. So there was a model of you. And she called it Carl 8. Carl is his father's name. Usually people have acronyms. This means something. This is just her father's name. And what it meant was to have a model of you helping you. We wanted to see how that would work. And because it really shouldn't be doing anything different than you do, so why would that be of help? The interesting result we got was The system could fail in a variety of ways. Pumps could fail, valves could fail, etc. But one thing that could fail would be the safety system, and everything starts shutting down, but it's not because there's anything wrong with the plant, it's the safety system that's gone wrong. And the subjects were not trained on how to deal with this, but they were told that it could happen. So half the subjects did not have Carl as their assistant. They didn't have the AI version of themselves as their assistant. And none of them were able to figure out the safety system failed. The other half had Carl aid to help them diagnose the safety system failure. But Carl knew nothing about the safety system failure. So there's no way he could help them. So what the aiding said to them, basically, don't worry, everything's fine. And all those subjects said, no, it's not fine, there's something wrong here, and they all found the problem. So this is artificial intelligence that's wrong that improved their performance. So there's a lot of interesting subtleties with this. Another interesting thing, we did the pilots associate work for DARPA many years ago. So created an artificial intelligent co-pilot for fighter pilots. And it was a fascinating project. I won't go into the details, but there's one thing that I learned there from interviewing fighter pilots that I've now heard a lot relative to using Waze and Google Maps, etc. And the different choices you have. The Uber driver I had yesterday had 2 different systems on. The fighter pilot said, I don't know where this rule came from in their culture, but basically once an automated system misleads me 3 times, I'll never use it again. Maybe it's 3 strikes and you're out kind of thing, I don't know. But I heard people saying that about their GPSs. That once it gives me bad directions 3 times, I don't use it anymore. I know they didn't interview fighter pilots too, but maybe they just have the same baseball metaphor, I don't know. But it is interesting when the automation doesn't work quite right, how people react to that. I've been running, I use Uber a lot, I don't have a car, and I've been running an experiment, no, I don't tell them this, is I interact and keep track of what happens and ask myself, what would I do if there was no driver here? And there's been quite a few times where the car just goes off in the wrong direction, and I have to explain to them, this won't get us where we're going. He said, but it tells me right here to turn here. I said, but it's wrong. Well, what would I do if he wasn't there? There's a lot of interesting questions like that.
Quick question, Bill. Is it said like that other companies could look at their possibilities in their domain for mergers and acquisitions, or that would be another whole?
Yeah, well, you certainly could. The merger acquisition activity in the healthcare industry is the greatest of any industry in the United States at all, because the Affordable Care Act is really driving that. In fact, I did a book with Dennis Cortese, the CEO of Mayo Clinic. In the last chapter, we predicted these 5,000 hospitals in the United States in 20 years will belong to maybe 10, 15 corporations. Because it's just the economy of scale and other things drive it. So it's kind of unusual circumstances. But I suppose it could be used. They'd have somewhat different rules. I don't know what their DRGs would be in their diagnostic related groups. But I think what we're trying to do, we've got a project, it's really early, called Enterprise Diagnostics that we want to host in here. And so far we've just been doing it on a laptop. But the idea of Enterprise Diagnostics is that whatever your company is, you'd have a multi-level simulation of you and your competitors and your marketplace, et cetera. And you could use it for 2 things. You could ask, is everything going okay in my enterprise today?
Like a dashboard.
Right. Yeah. And if it isn't, you could have various sources to figure out what's gone wrong. So we're doing a project with Sloan Kettering, which is sort of a junior version of this. They built a new outpatient clinic on 60th Street, and they put in $2 million of sensors. So they can keep track of anything that moves, patients, clinicians, equipment, et cetera. And the people who provided the sensors provided a dashboard that tells you what's in each room. But it turns out the people that are running the organization aren't really that interested in what's in each room. They have questions like, is everything okay today? Is this a normal Tuesday? Is anything going wrong? They don't want to get down to the level of, well, Dr. So-and-so is in room 6, and that's not how to approach that problem. So we're looking at how do we abstract that data, and of course we have to have it over time because if we're going to say, is it a good Tuesday, we have to know what other Tuesdays were, right? But that's an example of where we're going to try to create this sort of enterprise diagnostics approach, that you can see whether everything's okay, and if it isn't, you can figure out in some peel back the onion way, well, what is it, the problem? So I think there's a lot of possibilities. The one experiment we have run was based on a study we did of 12 automobiles that were taken off the market. 4 in the 1930s, 4 in the 1960s, and 4 in the 2000s. And the old ones are the Cord and the Pierce Arrow and stuff like that. The most recent ones are the Mercury and Oldsmobile and Pontiac. And we put together a model and ran some experiments already. And basically what the subject's question is, okay, these cars are removed from the market. They obviously weren't selling for the most part, but why were they taken off the market? And they have to sleuth through different levels of the car, the company, the industry, the economy, to figure out why the car failed. And they can use, we can track their trajectories of how they look at different sources. The first experiment showed, in fact, the journal article just came out. The first experiment showed that the more experienced subjects, the experienced sense of knowledgeable in the auto industry, had very different information-seeking patterns than the less experienced. And they sought a lot more information. They moved among the hierarchy of information much more before they reached a conclusion, and they did better. And the less experienced ones had fairly novice ways of approaching it. In some ways, you might even wonder whether they were just trying to get through the experiment. We did a similar experiment at Emory, where we had a thing called Health Advisor, which was a simulation of the healthcare system. And you, as a subject, had 500 patients you had to take care of. And you weren't a doctor; you were just their advisor. So you advised them where to go. And I think we had like 60 students in pre-med were the subjects. And we found that the subjects that were more sophisticated in their use of the information tools we provided did a very much better job at diagnosing correctly where the patient should go. And the others who just were very cursory in their information use often made big mistakes, fortunately just simulated mistakes. But those are some of the kind of experiments we're running. The reason we get into these experiments is because lots of times when people see some of our demos, they go, wow. But we ask the question, well, does this really improve decision making? And there's very little empirical data. Mostly it's just wow. And so, and in fact, there's several articles that talk about this. In fact, some of our industry partners have said they do large visualizations for their customers too, and the customers really like it. And they said, we have no idea whether this helps them or not. So we want to make a sort of an empirical side of all this. We start to run experiments and get to understand better how these visualizations and your ability to interact with them and the advice you get, how does that actually impact performance? That's the stuff that we've only run one experiment in that arena so far, but we're moving in that direction.